I'm going to be crisp and focused on trying to introduce some new ways to think about innovation patterns in the industries that sort of we're focused on collectively in the room today. My central contention everywhere that I talk is that innovation is different than we think. We fundamentally believe that innovation is about the creation of new products. It's long ago not been about that, okay? Everyone in this room should be savvy enough to know that we are in the business of creating hot platforms. I'm going to talk about platforms. I'm going to talk about specifically, because Heidi asked me to tell you about it, the 10 distinct types of innovation that drive breakthroughs anywhere that they happen, anywhere in the world. And then I'm going to talk to you about some new things, just emerging, new ways to visualize convergences. Jeremiah did a lovely job, I thought, of helping us to cut cubes out of fog in the social media space. I was deeply impressed with the logic and the discipline and the analytic rigor that he and his colleagues at Altimeter bring to these kinds of problems. We've worked with them in the past. They are systematically good at laying out issues around industries. What I'm going to give you a sense of is that every industry is now sort of standing on shifting sands, changing ecosystems. And I think we are on the cusp of a brand new way to visualize and understand the dynamic complexity of these market spaces. That's the essence of what I wanted to introduce for conversational purposes today. So 14 years ago, as I say, there was this discovery made in our firm, Doblin, about 10 types of innovation. To get there, what we did is we took more than 3,000 innovations throughout history, going back at that time 175 years, and looking at successful innovations, and discovering that in the history of successful innovations, it was always the case that people were using multiple types of innovation. Nevertheless, if you ask people to innovate inside your own enterprise, you decide you've got some kind of crisis of growth, you need to figure out how to get more organic growth to happen. What happens almost every time is somebody runs around all the cubicles, thumps everybody on the head, picks the ones that sound ripest, and sticks them in a room, and says, okay, innovate now. When asked to innovate, what people assume they're trying to develop is some new product. And so when I build out these types of innovation, perversely I'm going to do it from the middle of the model. In the middle of the model is this idea of an offering. Okay? So somebody focuses on the product per se. If there are engineers on the team, they will have axioms. They will say the product has to be 10x better than whatever it's replacing. They will have a variety of cost metrics, et cetera, but people will invariably focus predominantly on products we can prove this is the dumbest place to start and a completely inadequate way to finish. Okay? So what happens is you start to think about the product as a product system. That's what gets you about a 10-year usable life instead of a multiple-week usable life. And you create integrated services that make it a pleasure to use. Under the covers, of course, you see lots and lots of other things helping to advance processes. We make two important distinctions in types of innovation between core processes, which would be proprietary to your own enterprise. You know how to do it. Nobody else does. It might even be patent protected. And by the way, these slides are being posted for you like all the others that you're hearing about. So don't worry about capturing the content. Just try to stay in the story with me. And enabling processes are the ones that you can buy from other firms that you can leverage and use in a surprising way. These 5 types of innovation dominate the way larger scale enterprises think, driven by their strategic planning processes and the emphasis on core competencies, which is a bloody shame because the evidence is now quite overwhelming that the other 5 types of innovation are bigger drivers of radical shifts in marketplaces. Downstream, channel, brand, and customer experience. And upstream, the 2 that I spend most of my time with good PhD candidates thinking through is new dimensions of partnering. We call that networking. And new ways of driving richer, better business models, viable business models into changing ecosystems. One of the things that's important about this is that grounded in our patterns of strategic planning are all kinds of things that force us to hyper-emphasize the center of the model. We call that center-weighted innovation. And we know it's an epic disaster. Okay? So when you're asked, what are your core competencies, it's a way of saying, what are you going to do next year that will leverage what you were good at last year, right? What's interesting to me is my hero, C.K. Prahalad, the guy that thought up core competencies long ago, walked away from it. he would poo-poo it ever so politely, saying when people handed him a typically very enshrined, sometimes laminated list of their core competencies, he would put it to the side and say, yeah, well, sure, if you got some core competencies, go ahead and think about that. But you want to do something amazing? You want to do something that'll change the world? Well, for God's sakes, create a wicked cool customer experience and get paid for it in some fundamentally new way. This is what caused him for the last 10 years of his life to focus on bottom-of-the-pyramid innovations, which have been so tremendously useful in radically altering the pace of innovation all around the world, okay? Now, we think that people have a hard time grasping this, and we can prove it. So when we do surveys of what people are looking at in anonymous ways of just profiling the kinds of things that they're trying to invent, what's off the charts is new products. But when you strip out the ones that lose money, and you pay attention instead to the ones that make money, you find something fairly shocking. The people that combine multiple types of innovation, and specifically from the periphery instead of the center, are the ones that make money. Everyone looks for Pareto optimization, right? And it's really interesting how asymmetric it is in profound innovation. Fewer than 2% of innovation initiatives globally in the last 10 years have generated more than 90% of the global economic value added. Isn't that interesting? What's fascinating about this, we had one client ask us about the covariance of the types of innovation. Specifically, they were saying, if I change one, how many others tend to come along for the ride? This very elegant piece of analytic work, done with the help of my colleagues at Monitor, was able to reveal to us something, again, vitally important to understand. Innovation, very simplistically, skews into two kinds of levels of ambition. You're either doing simple innovation, which is 3 or fewer types of innovation, or you're doing sophisticated innovation, which is 5 or more types of innovation. And the rule of thumb, maybe the one thing you want to try to remember from our conversation this morning prior to the break, is that it takes 6 or more types of innovation orchestrated with care to change the world. Okay? That's when you get to the threshold that you're doing enough things that you're sort of getting the attention of customers, you're stunning, often wrong-footing and confusing competitors, you're attracting a new breed of partners, and you're doing something important enough and tough enough that it's likely to last without meaningful competition for a decade or so. Now, we think people get this more easily if they can see some quick examples. And in that little computer that we finally got working there in the back, I have more than 3,400 cases deconstructed in terms of the types of innovation, all right? So it's, once you get used to this, you start to see it everywhere. And you start to see it as a sort of really interesting way to sort things out. Let's take a look at an old case. The global keiretsu that makes personal computers has more than 1,200 firms in it. And it's been around for 22.5 years. And in that global keiretsu, only 4 firms are reliably profitable over that time horizon, and Dell is one of them. Now, how many of you use Dell computers? Okay, and how do you feel about your Dell computers? You picking up the emotional intensity in the room? How many of you use Macintoshes? How many of you feel about your Macintoshes? Slightly different emotional intensity, right? Here's the thing that's sort of fascinating. For 22 years, Dell's one of the few firms in the personal computer business that's been reliably profitable, and nobody freaking likes their products. What's the deal with that? How do you pull that one off? Well, what's going on is right from the beginning, driven to it out of adversity, no conscious thought here, Michael Dell and his colleagues used 8 different types of innovation to get their business model to work. What's the one that they don't give a rat's ass about? Fundamentally, the product, right? It's just a bunch of parts in the bins in the back, supplied by the suppliers with good, nice credit terms for Dell, right? So that on average, they've got 38 days to pay the parts suppliers after they hit your credit card and build your computer for you to your order, okay? Very different business model than everybody else in the industry. Now, we made a case that 5 years ago, they should have started caring about the product. They missed the boat, fundamentally. They missed the opportunity to do that. Contrast that with the Apple integrated music offering. Again, naive users think it's about the device and the parade of devices. Of course, it's really about the elegant little piece of software that manages your collection of media, and of course, the iTunes Music Store. First device debuted in the first half of 2001. iTunes Music Store debuted second half of 2003. 2 years and 2 months later, what was going on? Everybody just too busy putting the little iPods in the little packages? No, the truth is they had 200 lawyers negotiating around the world and around the clock for the rights to sell you songs one at a time. Okay? It's now unthinkable to us that we wouldn't be able to do that, but remember what happens to most firms most of the time. You're whittling away at your ideas, you're doing the best you can, and somebody shows up at your little cubicle and says, well, that idea you're working on, it would be great, except for the fact that it is illegal, or that it doesn't map to our core competencies, and immediately you start quivering and saying, oh no, this is bad. I better stop thinking this way. Okay, that's not what they do at Apple, basically because their CEO is a famously intense Nazi. But what's going on is that there are 8 distinct types of innovation and evidence here, enough to come 5th to the party of MP3 players, but still get 70% market share and maintain that with high margins over a very long period of time. Nifty knitting, okay? Let's take a look at Google now. Everybody knows, especially in this neighborhood, that it's page-rank technology under the covers, but AdSense technology that pays the bills. Looked at through a multiple types of innovation lens, 8 types of innovation turns out to have been enough a few years ago, now 12 years ago, to create the world's most successful media company in that period of time, and to do it in a way that is still, for the moment, beloved by most users. Okay? 8 types of innovation with a 9th type coming on strong as they adapt everything in their world to the world of mobility and the Android platform as well. Target shows that it's possible to think this way even if you're a sort of channel 2 market. They had a tiny little competitor in Wal-Mart. They're trying to figure out how to carve out something distinctive. What they did is in every department, look for ways to make distinctive offerings. Yes, that woman is wearing an air cleaner from an automobile. And there are 7 distinct types of innovation here in evidence, enough to make them a viable, even beloved player in the retail marketplace when that business is brutal and tough. Now, when you think about this systematically, what you can do is start to catalog the variance under each of these types of innovation globally. My colleagues at Monitor, collaborating with us at Doblin, have built this global analysis of generic innovation types, a total of 104, that we can find purest examples about in the world. This is hard to read and a little dry, so we turned it into a deck of playing cards, okay? And it's now possible to deal yourself an innovation poker hand. And you do that by going through these innovation tactics cards. They're sort of spread across the 10 types of innovation. They go deep into the individual exemplars that we're finding somewhere in the world. We define and give examples of each and provide simple principles about how you would use them to create something new, okay? So what I'm suggesting to you is that when you want to go deeply into innovation, you need to be more exploratory. You need to be a spelunker of innovation. You need to sort of go caving and ask yourself, what kinds of options are available? How can I use more of them? How can I surprise everybody in the industry and do something in a way that is deep, thoughtful, surprising, and viable over time? Okay? The last thing that I wanted to talk about is the way in which we think about this in terms of partnerships and the way in which we make these principles that I'm sharing with you practical news that you can use, okay? So it has 2 consequences very simply. Inside of a firm, you need to develop a competence around innovation that allows you to become individually good at innovating, okay? We think of this as innovation with teeth. What's now beginning to occur in the better firms is they are installing innovation operating systems that radically alter the probability of innovation success, the degree of innovation success, the velocity of innovation success, and the return on investment from an innovation activity. Okay? So innovation, as I like to say, is giving up its secrets for the first time in history. When we were kids, you and me, innovation was always sort of a vague hope. We wanted it to occur. We would get really smart people, we would stick them in rooms, and we would wait for the lightning to strike, right? We all know about geniuses, gadflies, tinkerers, and mad scientists, and the whole history sort of enshrined in stories like Caractacus teapots and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the crazy people that create the new. That is routinely, systematically giving way to firms that actually install deep innovation competencies. So if you want to innovate, let me just tell you that the new thing you can do is you can attach the right kinds of methods, tools, metrics, and incentive systems in order to get people to innovate reliably. We call that innovation with teeth. What is exciting, interesting, and new is the way in which innovation is beginning to give up its secrets and starting to create new forms of combinatorial diversity and combinatorial sophistication. So in terms of leadership, once you decide that innovation is imperative, you have these choices. You can no longer, in most cases, get by with simple innovation. You need some form of sophisticated innovation. This has one revolution inside the firm, a parallel revolution across multiple firms throughout an ecosystem. Okay? And to innovate with teeth inside your firm, the good news is you can now hire fairly cheaply, it turns out, students that can do it, firms that can do it, lots of folks that can install these kinds of methods for you. Across multiple firms, which is what the conversation in this conference is going to be about today and tomorrow, is the ways in which you can combine what you're doing in surprising new ways to make the entire offering appealing. You can see the future sooner than you otherwise would. The first issue is, do you see the future clearly and can you embrace it bravely? Okay? If you can see it, great. If you can't, you're going to need some special methodologies to help you to understand the convergences. Jeremiah and I have both ended this way, telling you that the businesses you're in are probably too tough to wing it, and probably not something that you can understand thoroughly just by using classic industry analytic techniques. Okay? The second thing is, do you have a way of moving faster than the background marketplace? If you're not moving faster than the background marketplace, in the immortal words of Jack Welch, you're already dead, you just haven't stopped breathing yet. Okay? This is what Charles Darwin taught us all, that the fundamental issue is moving faster than the ecosystem, or at least as fast as the ecosystem can tolerate. Okay? The next thing to ask is, what convergences will we embrace and accelerate? Which ones will we participate in? What are we surfing in? Okay? What's our form of energy that we're going to use for surfing along and finding the future first? Do we have a specific mission for innovation, and do we know what metrics apply? Do we know how we're going to radically simplify customer actions so that we make their lives simpler, not harder? We don't add to the confusions of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to find and how they make sense of it all. Then you ask yourself, what is the smallest number of the boldest initiatives we need to succeed? One of the most important principles to derive from the better venture capital firms is paying attention to the hardest things we have to get right, not the low-hanging fruit. You want to create a breakthrough? You don't use low-hanging fruit logic. You use, what are the hardest things we have to get right, or said a different way, what's the smallest number of critical innovation initiatives we need to create boldly in order to succeed? And will those produce platforms that amplify return on investment, get high velocity uptake, and go on to change the world? That, ladies and gentlemen, is a little 7-point roadmap about how you make these kinds of actions very simple. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I really appreciate it.